Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well today. So I am back today with yet another sewing project, and today's sewing project is another dress. I think this is the second one that I have made this fall, and I really love how this one turned out. So let me show it to you. So there's a lot of fabric here, so I don't think this will really fit in frame, but it is a square neck dress with these awesome big sleeves. I've been seeing all of these really pretty puffy sleeves on Instagram lately, and I thought I would do something similar. It also has this drawstring detail here, which I think is so pretty, and then a square neckline front and back. And then it is also a maxi length skirt, so it falls right around my ankles, and it's 2 tiers. Now for this dress, I was really inspired by styles from Reformation and also Christy Dawn. I really like their very flowy, light kind of autumnal dresses. So that's what I was going for here. Now let me show you the pattern that I used to create this dress, because I really want to show you guys how you can adapt a pattern to create whatever you want just by looking for a few basic things. So this is the pattern that I used, and you can see it's this very fitted kind of shorter dress, but what I was looking for was something with the elasticated bands here and a square neckline and then sleeves like this. So this ended up working perfectly, and I'll show you throughout this video how I added on my tiered skirt and adjusted the bodice to be more what I was looking for. This pattern is from McCall's. This is number 8034. But let me go ahead and jump right in and let's talk about how I made this dress. So the fabric that I've chosen for this project is this beautiful rayon from Rifle Paper Company from their most recent collection, and I love the colors on this for fall. So the first thing I'm going to do is alter my pattern just a little bit. Because this pattern is designed with an empire waist, I want to change it so that it has a waistline at the natural waist. So I'm going to overlay the bodice and skirt pieces by 5/8 of an inch and trim this off at the waistline. So this just makes these pieces hit me at my waistline instead of an empire waist, and creates the bodice design that I'm looking for. Then working with the back panels for this dress, these are all done as one piece, so I can just trim these off at the waistline. And with all of my pattern pieces adjusted, I could go ahead and cut out my bodice. Now I am going to cut out 2 versions of the bodice because I want to have an interior lining, so I will cut out both the bodice and the lining pieces from the same fabric. Now, if you're watching really closely here, you might notice that I'm cutting these pieces upside down. The pattern is actually going the wrong way, but thankfully I noticed before I cut out both copies of the bodice, so I could just use these upside down pieces as the lining and not waste any fabric. So next I'm going to cut out my sleeves, and I'm cutting the sleeves out just as the pattern indicates because I love the design and I don't want to change anything here. And then the last piece for the bodice is to cut out these little drawstring pieces for the sleeves, which I'm cutting out on the bias. So moving on now to the tiered skirt, I want my skirt to be 2 tiers, and each tier will be made up of 2 rectangles of fabric. So let's get the measurements for those really quickly. For the upper tier, I'm going to start with my waist measurement, and my waist measurement is 27 inches. I'll multiply that by 2 and then add 2 inches of ease. Then I'll divide that number in half to give me the width for each of the upper tier pieces. And that gives me my final measurement for this tier's width, which is 29 inches, and I've decided on a length of 16 inches, but you could do whatever length you want. Then for the lower tier, I'm going to take the upper tier measurement, add 15 inches to that, which gives me 44, and then I'm going to go with a length of 20 inches. So I'll cut out 2 of each of these rectangles. So I'm just going to use my tape measure and measure out my rectangles for my skirt and cut out all of those pieces. So with all of that done, it was time to get started sewing. So I decided to start by assembling the bodice pieces. So I'm starting here with the bodice front pieces. There's a center and 2 sides, and I'm just going to pin these together with the right sides together and sew these seams with a straight stitch and a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm not going to finish the seams off with the serger since I'm going to line the bodice, so I will just press all of these open. So here you can see the bodice front, and it's looking really good. And now I'm going to move on to the bodice back pieces and do exactly the same thing here, just pinning them together with the right sides together and sewing those down with a straight stitch. I won't sew the center here because that is being kept open for a zipper later on. With the front and back assembled, I can go ahead and pin the back pieces to the front and sew down the side seams with a straight stitch, and then I will repeat all of these steps for the lining. So now I'm going to work on these really fun sleeves, and the first thing I'm going to do is sew 2 buttonholes where it's marked on the pattern here at the bottom edge of the sleeve. I did add a little bit of fusible interfacing to the back of my fabric just because it's really thin, and I know my sewing machine doesn't like to sew buttonholes on thin fabric, so I thought I'd reinforce that just a little bit. So I'm going to sew the buttonholes and then cut those open with some small sharp scissors. And with the buttonholes done, I can go ahead and sew the side seams on my sleeve. So I'm going to sew this and then also serge the edge to finish it off since the sleeves are not lined. Next, I'm going to turn up the lower edge of the sleeve to make a casing for our drawstring that will go through those buttonholes. So I'll start by turning this up 1/4 of an inch and then fold along the fold line marked on the pattern and then sew this down with a straight stitch, making sure to leave enough space for the drawstring to be threaded through. Then I'm going to create a casing at the top of the sleeve by applying some bias tape. Now you could buy bias tape, but I made my own. And there are 2 markings on the sleeve pattern for where to start and end pinning on the bias tape. So I've just opened it out and placed it with the right sides together all along that edge. And then I'll sew this down with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. After I finish sewing the seam, I will trim away any excess fabric and then fold and press the bias tape towards the inside. Then I'll run a row of top stitching right over the bias tape along the edge so that I can fit some elastic through this casing. I've gone ahead and cut my elastic according to the elastic guide, which comes with this pattern. So whatever size you're making, there will be an elastic measurement that goes with that. And then I'm just threading that through using a safety pin, and then I'll pin this down on either end and use a little bit of top stitching on either end just to secure that in place. To make the drawstrings, I'll start by sewing together 2 of the drawstring pieces in the center, and then I will fold that with the right sides together and sew all the way down using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. After I finish sewing this together, I'll go ahead and trim away any excess fabric so that it's easier to turn because this is a really narrow piece of fabric, and then I'll use a small safety pin to turn it right side out. Then I'm just going to give it a quick press to make sure everything looks really nice and even. So now I'm going to use that same safety pin to thread the drawstring through the sleeve casing, going through those buttonholes that we made earlier. And I'm just going to make sure that this is really evenly dispersed so I have the same amount on either end so that when I tie it in a bow, it looks really nice and neat. Now the ends of these drawstrings are still raw edges, so I'm going to use my scissors just to turn that under, and then when I get to the end of my project, I will just tack that down by hand. So now I can go ahead and add my sleeves to my bodice. Now you may have noticed I trimmed away a little bit of fabric there. That's because I actually raised the back by 1 inch in the neckline, and I forgot to mention that earlier. So I'm just making that even there. And then I'm going to match up the side seams of the sleeves with the side seams of the bodice and pin the sleeves in place and sew along this curve. Now these are not circular sleeves. They're not completely set in. It's just that lower curve, which actually makes them really easy to sew in. And I really enjoyed making this because of this. I don't always love putting sleeves together. It can be kind of annoying. So I like this technique a lot. So now the bodice is assembled and I can go ahead and add the lining. So I'm just going to move my sleeves out of the way and put the lining against the top of the bodice with the right sides together. Then I'll just sew all the way across, which catches the sleeves within the seam. And then I'm also going to understitch this just to make sure everything goes to the inside and looks really nice. So now I can work on the skirt, and I'm going to start by sewing the side seams of each tier of the skirt. So I'm going to pin this together with the right sides together and just sew along each side and also use my serger to finish off the edge. Now working with the upper tier, I need to make sure that I can put my zipper in the dress. So I'm going to split this in the back right along the center and serge each of those edges. Then I'll just sew up just a little bit of this, about a couple of inches on the bottom, and then press that open. This leaves a gap for the zipper. I'm just going to give all of the seams a quick press to make sure everything looks really nice and tidy, and I will press that back seam open so that the zipper can lay really flat when I put that in. And now I'm going to move on to sewing my gathering stitches. So I'm going to run 2 rows of gathering stitches along the top of each tier, and then this will be what creates the nice flounce in the skirt. And with my gathering threads sewn, I can go ahead and attach the 2 tiers together. So I'm going to pull the gathering threads in the lower tier and adjust this to fit the upper tier. I'll match my side seams together so that I can make sure everything is really nice and evenly distributed. And then I will pin this with the right sides together and sew this down with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and serge off the edge. These 2 combined together make the full length of the skirt. And once that's attached, I can remove those gathering threads from the lower tier just to make sure they're not visible. And I'm also going to press the seam. I find this easier to do before I attach the skirt to the bodice. So now I'm ready to attach my skirt to the bodice, so I'm going to start by gathering the gathering stitches on the upper tier and follow the same steps that I did to attach the 2 tiers together. So I'm going to match this up to the bodice with the right sides together, matching the side seams and making sure that everything is really evenly distributed and looks really good. Now I'm not going to sew my lining into this. I will sew the lining down later. So I'm just going to attach the skirt to the outer bodice piece. So with the dress, bodice, and skirt put together, I can now add my zipper. I'm going to use an invisible zipper, and I start by unzipping it, and then I'm going to place the zipper with the zipper tape facing the edge of the dress and the zipper teeth facing towards the sleeve. So I'm going to place this down and pin it down and go ahead and sew this in place as close to those zipper teeth as I can. Now I don't actually use a zipper foot when I put zippers in. I don't find it to be necessary, I guess. It just works for me without it, but it might look kind of strange because I am just using a regular presser foot. So to sew the other half of the zipper, I like to start by zipping the zipper up, and then I will use a pin to mark where the waistline seam is. This makes it easier for me to make this match on the other side. So I'll just place that pin through the zipper teeth right at the waistline. Then I'm going to unzip my zipper, and then I can match that pin up to the waistline on the opposite side, and that just makes it easier for me to make sure that everything is in place and looks really good once it's sewn. And then I'll just sew down the other side of the zipper in the same way. Now I'm going to sew the back lining pieces to the zipper with the zipper open. So what I'm going to do here is open up the zipper and then pin the back pieces together, the back piece and the lining. Then I'll just sew down this as if it were a back seam and make sure not to catch the zipper in my seam. That way when I turn everything to the right side, it looks really nice and neat. Did a very simple hem on this dress. I just serged the edge and then pressed up the serging and sewed that down on my sewing machine. So nothing fancy here. Then for a few final details that I did by hand, I turned that lining under and pinned it to the waistline and then just sewed that down by hand to the seam so that everything is nice and invisible and you can't see it from the right side. I really like this finish for when I line the bodice on a dress. I just think it looks really nice. You could definitely just top stitch this on the outside though if you prefer. I also went ahead and tacked down the ends on all of those little drawstrings, and then I also added a hook and eye to the back neckline so that it comes together and looks really even when I'm wearing the dress. So here's a look at how the dress turned out. I absolutely love it. I love how flowy and comfortable it is. This fabric has such a nice drape to it, and I love the statement sleeves on this. I'd really like to make a shirt just using this pattern and maybe just making it a little bit longer or something like that. I think it would be really cute. I'm really excited to style this dress. I think it's going to look great with a denim jacket, and I can definitely see myself wearing this a lot of different ways. So I'm really happy with how it turned out. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed seeing how this project came together. I really love how this dress turned out. This is going to be my Thanksgiving dress this year, even though I'm not doing anything fancy. I love having a dress for Thanksgiving, so I'm going to wear it with my slippers around the house and be very comfy. It's a very comfortable dress as well. I will be back tomorrow with a wrap up of all of my fall sewing projects, and then on Friday I will be back with my holiday sewing plans, which I'm really excited about. So I hope you guys will look forward to a lot of festive content coming up. I have so many Christmassy things in the works that I'm really excited about. But that is going to be it for this video today. Thank you guys again so much for watching. If you are not subscribed, you can go ahead and subscribe by clicking the red button down below. And if you'd like to follow me on Instagram, I will put my username here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye!